Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're looking at a pretty fascinating story recently covered in depth by the Londoner News. It's a situation where a routine, unpaid charity host announcement basically transformed overnight into a massive national flashpoint. We're talking media ethics, welfare policies, the responsibilities of broadcasters, the whole shebang. Let's just dive right into this and see how a single event sent ripples across the UK media landscape and honestly, why it really matters for how we all consume our daily news.
Which brings us to a really core dilemma. We're going to explore how the lines between impartial broadcasting, public sentiment, and charity advocacy collided here. It actually forces us to ask, when does attempting to host a neutral media debate actually become a harmful distraction for the very people it's discussing?
So here's our roadmap for today. 1. The controversial appointment. 2. The online backlash. 3. Vine steps down. And 4. The wider welfare debate.
Okay, let's start with Section 1. The controversial appointment.
I mean, the speed at which this whole thing unfolded is just wild. On August 16, 2026, Jeremy Vine's Channel 5 program aired a segment discussing potential cuts to disability benefits. Literally the very next day, August 17th, Carers UK proudly announced him as the host for their upcoming awards. Then, on August 18th, another segment aired on his show debating whether benefits claimants should clean the high street. And by August 20th, just 3 days after that initial announcement, Vine stepped down amid a really intense public backlash.
Now, as the Londoner News highlighted, the original intent of this event is absolutely crucial to keep in mind. The Carers UK Awards, scheduled for October 2026 at Plasterers Hall in London, have a pure and genuinely vital mission. They are designed exclusively to celebrate unpaid carers, campaigners, and volunteers. It's an event meant to shine a spotlight on people who dedicate their lives to supporting others behind the scenes.
So, how did we get from an event celebrating unpaid carers to a fierce national controversy over a television host? Why did an unpaid charity gig spark such intense outrage?
That takes us to Section 2, the online backlash.
You see, critics weren't necessarily coming after Vine personally, but rather the way his daytime TV debates were framing disabled people and welfare claimants. We're talking about on-screen graphics asking if political parties are right to call for cuts to disability benefits, or actively debating if claimants should clean the high streets. For critics, these recurring discussions focusing heavily on fraud and affordability create a distinctly hostile narrative for the exact same people Carers UK is meant to advocate for.
And the strength of feeling from the community was severe. Campaigner Mike O'Brien really captured the sentiment driving the massive Change.org petition and the social media storm, stating, "This man has made clear his hate for disabled people. You have chosen to stab us all in the back." That is incredibly strong language, right? And it just goes to show the immense, crushing pressure that was placed squarely on Carers UK to reverse their decision.
To really understand the media mechanics at play here, and honestly, this is relevant to anyone scrolling through a social feed today, we need to define a term heavily cited by critics in the Femine Gras report on this incident: rage bait. It's essentially deliberately provocative content designed to spark anger and boost viewership. The argument here is that even if the host's intent is simply to moderate a debate, the framing itself causes real-world harm by leaning into negative stereotypes about vulnerable people.
Which leads us to a really complex question. How in the world do you balance this massive, very real public outrage with a broadcaster's personal intent?
Let's look at Section 3, Vine steps down.
There's actually a really profound human element behind all these headlines. When Vine announces withdrawal on social media, he revealed his motivation to take the gig wasn't some calculated PR move. It was an unpaid role he accepted for deeply personal reasons. He said, "I originally said yes to support a friend who watched her husband die in a long and painful process. I see her as a heroine." It's a pretty stark reminder that behind these massive public media storms, there are often very private, very human motivations driving the decisions people make.
Vine also strongly defended his professional record. He really emphasized his role as a neutral moderator, stating, "I'm not a campaigner, and guests on my shows know I have to be impartial. I believe we've only ever covered them sympathetically." He argued that as a broadcaster, his job is just to facilitate difficult public conversations, not to pick a side, and that simply hosting a debate definitely doesn't equate to endorsing harmful views.
But, ultimately, the noise just became way too loud. Carers UK released a statement saying that after listening to their community, they mutually agreed with Vine that he should step down. The really crucial point is their reasoning. They needed the focus of the evening to stay entirely on celebrating carers, without the risk of other content becoming a distraction. The charity had to put its core mission above its celebrity host.
This whole saga forces us to zoom out for a second and ask a structural question about the charity sector. Are celebrity ambassadors actually worth the reputational risk?
Which brings us to our final section, the wider welfare debate.
To understand the outrage, you have to look at the UK in the summer of 2026. It is a highly charged political environment when it comes to welfare. As noted in the reports, a government review recently declared PIP, the Personal Independence Payment, not fit for purpose. There are active, sweeping reviews into the carers allowance and universal credit. Political factions like Reform UK are actively proposing tens of billions in welfare cuts. For disabled people and carers, these aren't just abstract television debates. They feel like existential threats to their income and independence. And meanwhile, charities are just desperate for high-profile ambassadors to cut through this intense political noise so they can actually be heard.
So we're really left with this fundamental clash of perspectives. On one side, you have broadcaster neutrality. That's Vine's view that hosting opposing political views and asking the tough questions is the very definition of impartial journalism. But on the exact opposite side, you have harmful framing. This is the critic's view that treating vulnerable people's lives and incomes as fodder for a daytime debate is inherently biased and shapes negative public perception, completely regardless of the host's personal neutrality.
Let me throw a number at you. 6,000. According to a civil society report, that is the number of recognized rare conditions in the UK alone. Just think about that for a second. That is thousands of patient groups and charities fighting for oxygen, fighting for funding, and fighting just to be seen. This highlights exactly why charities take risks on celebrity ambassadors in the first place. Even with the potential for massive backlash, the opportunity to get their vital causes heard above the deafening noise of the daily news cycle is a risk many feel they absolutely have to take.
Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on as we wrap up this explainer. In today's highly polarized climate, can the media ever truly host a neutral debate on human welfare? Or does the very act of treating someone's livelihood as a debatable topic inherently take a side? Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope this provided a really clear, structured look into the complexities behind the headlines. See you next time.